So, here we are, finally. Peter Capaldi has regenerated at the end of Twice Upon a Time. But what did I think of it? That is the question. Before we get there, though, a quick thing on the Eaters of Light, because I never did an official review on it, largely because I just didn't care enough about it, nor did I have enough to say about it to really waste my time making a review on it. So in 30 seconds, Eaters of Light was remarkably mediocre, the premise was interesting, but every other aspect of it was just so slightly below average that it's really just doomed to sink into fandom obscurity because, like other episodes like The Reign of Terror and For to Doomsday, it isn't quite bad enough to gain any real kind of infamy, even though I hate For to Doomsday, but it isn't really good enough to gain any popularity, so it basically just ends up being forgotten. Overall, Eaters of Light was remarkably mediocre and largely forgettable. Now on to the event at hand, Twice Upon a Time, this episode. Where to begin? The good things, I think. The acting is amazing. Not a particularly noteworthy statement, given that the acting of Season 10 and the Capaldi era as a whole has been really good. Capaldi's performance is very good, and David Bradley does an excellent job impersonating William Hartnell. Not perfect, but as close as it is possible to get, I think. I also like the use of the 1914 Christmas truce. I thought that was very good, and the direction and cinematography of this episode was fabulous. Otherwise, though, I found that the episode fell largely short of expectations for me. First, just to get it out of the way, the writing of the First Doctor. What is this? Seriously, what is this? I'm speechless. It's an appalling and disgraceful treatment of a beloved character that was a childhood hero to millions. I'm speaking, of course, of the constant, and I mean constant, remarks by the First Doctor in this episode. I could have looked past one or two, but no. There were like 7 or 8 times that the First Doctor acts sexist, and some, like the all women are made of glass line, are just extremely egregious. And there appears to be no true purpose for the inclusion of these lines other than cheap jokes and to make the new series look so progressive. The problem is that for something to be progressive, it needs to actually progress from something. I'll be the first to admit that 1960s Doctor Who was not perfect, but for its time it was probably one of the most progressive shows on air. I mean, it was produced by the BBC's first ever female producer, Verity Lambert. And yes, there are times in the 1960s that are sexist, but they're really largely sparse and at most only moderately questionable. Twice Upon a Time would have you believe that the classic series is extremely sexist all of the time. It's not even the writing itself of this episode that bothers me, though. Not really. Anyone who has seen actual First Doctor stories can look at Twice Upon a Time and go, well, they got the First Doctor completely wrong. How insulting. Oh well, at least we can still go back and watch the episodes where they got him right. What a wasted opportunity. It would still be an insult to the First Doctor, but it wouldn't tarnish the character itself, except for people who take every throwaway line of every episode with the utmost seriousness and as indelible canon, where the sexism in Twice Upon a Time must then be applied to the First Doctor's character in all of his episodes, even the ones where he isn't sexist at all, so that the canon lines up. But, you know, I think most fans are not that stringent. They're very stringent, yes, I will say that, but I don't think most are that stringent. Anyway, what makes me furious about the portrayal of the First Doctor in this episode is that probably at least like 2/3 of the people watching Twice Upon a Time have probably never seen a First Doctor episode or have maybe only seen one in part. Twice Upon a Time is probably many people's first introduction to the First Doctor or to a classic Doctor, or maybe even the classic series. I mean, all of these people are now going to see the First Doctor, his era, and maybe the entirety of the classic series, as useless sexist drivel. As someone who loves the classic series deeply, it's heartbreaking to watch Twice Upon a Time more or less actively discourage people from watching it. So in summary, sexist First Doctor is bad because it's an insult to the character and about as close as you could get to actively telling someone not to watch the classic era. We're not even into this review yet. The music in the episode itself is lazy. I get that Murray Gold wanted to do a kind of greatest hits, but this is Peter Capaldi's last episode, and the entire time we're just listening to past Doctors' themes. I don't even think that Jodie Whittaker got new music in her one scene. While I like Murray Gold's work, and the music used in this episode is still good, I would have much preferred to see an original score for a Doctor's last episode, and that lack of occasion is largely this story's biggest problem. It just doesn't feel like the exit episode for a doctor, more like a filler story. For instance, this story has perhaps the lowest stakes that any episode has ever had in the show's history, given that about halfway through the episode it is revealed that there isn't actually a villain. Now what this means is that while the first time watching this episode through might be interesting, watching it a second time, knowing what's going on and that there's actually no stakes or anything, just makes it incredibly boring. I tried to, but I just had to turn it off, honestly. I just couldn't become invested in the story on my second viewing. For Capaldi's Regeneration story, this is really sad, given that he is either my second or third favorite Doctor of all time. He deserved a much better script for his departure than he got. The plot was paper thin and all over the place, the structure was awful. Again, it didn't feel like the exit episode of a Doctor. Finally, we've got the supporting characters. The captain was good, I liked the captain, and Bill, I guess, was okay. But otherwise, I just did not like the way the other people in this episode were written. Other than the purposeless sexism, the first Doctor felt largely unnecessary to the story. You could have removed him and the plot would have remained basically the same. He did not accurately represent the first Doctor's era or his personality and the way he was written, and ultimately, other than being the butt of a few jokes and giving a few good lines here and there, he was just largely a non-entity in the story. I was interested initially to see how they were going to use the first Doctor's not wanting to regenerate as a foil for Capaldi's refusal to regenerate, but it soon became apparent that that aspect of the episode was largely non-existent. There was maybe one brief exchange where 12 and 1 spoke about why they were afraid to regenerate, but it was cut short before 12 actually had the chance to say anything. A brief side note, though. A lot of people are probably expecting me to dislike the first Doctor's not wanting to regenerate, but I actually kind of liked it. I thought it was fine. It was an interesting addition to the story, and it makes sense to me that the first Doctor wouldn't want to regenerate because of fear. I mean, it would be different if this was a later incarnation of the Doctor not wanting to regenerate, like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. But to me, the first Doctor makes sense because it is the first time he's had to regenerate. All he knows is that as he dies, he is going to change appearance and personality. He's never gone through it before. He doesn't know if it'll hurt. He doesn't know if he'll just cease to exist as the man he was. And then there's the fact, as we can see from Castrovalva, that the body can reject regeneration. If I could regenerate, I'd be afraid to do it my first time. So it makes sense to me that even a brave and determined character like the first Doctor might be afraid to regenerate. Capaldi's reasons for refusing to regenerate are also made slightly more clear here, even though they do still come out of nowhere. There also doesn't seem to be much reason for him to suddenly decide that he actually does want to regenerate. I guess meeting all of his dead friends convinced him that he shouldn't die. Tangent, real fast, but I think it would have been much more interesting if perhaps a little bit too dark for modern Doctor Who, if instead of focusing on the fairy tale, no one is actually dead aspects, the episode had instead focused more on the conflict of seeing and talking to someone who looks and acts exactly like your dead friend, yet who you know isn't actually your friend, just an imperfect copy of their memories. I think that would have been a much more interesting story, but, you know. Speaking of more interesting possibilities, Clara, as she appears for 15 seconds at the end of this episode for no apparent reason and inexplicably restores all of the memories that 12 lost in Hellbent by touching him on the cheek. Then Clara is gone. No reason for any of this is given. I guess I do like that 12 got his memories of, seasons 8 and 9 back. There's no real reason why, or how, so that happened. But while we're on the topic of Clara, let me tell you real fast where I thought this episode was going and what actually made me really excited for a time, the first time I watched the episode. You see, I thought that the projection from the Hall of the Dead was actually Clara. Everything just seemed to fit perfectly. You've got the concept of freezing someone at the moment of their death, just like Clara. You've got a computer projection with a slightly imperfect face, based on a human, a la Clara. You've got something going horribly wrong with time. You see, I was thinking that Clara's survival must have, messed up the entire web of time and caused it to collapse as she cheated the fixed point of her death. And then I thought that maybe since she wasn't actually alive, technically, that the computer projection in the Hall of Dead was actually a projection of her, and she was somehow using the memories taken from the dying people to continue her own existence. In the Hall of the Dead, and the Hall of the Dead was actually the diner TARDIS she stole at the Shielder with the chameleon circuit fixed, and that 12 was going to have to recognize the error of his ways and what he did in Hellbent and face the consequences of that decision. Why did I think the new series would ever try something that interesting? Anyway, after everything else is done, the 12th Doctor returns to his TARDIS and regenerates after another long, drawn-out regeneration speech. I've heard people say they like it, but I personally don't. It seems to me to be largely unnecessary and doesn't add much to the moment. If anything, I found my emotions actually decreasing as the speech went on. I mean, regeneration should be special and different for each Doctor, but this really just felt like 11's done over again, except I liked it less. Then we get to the last words, "Doctor, I let you go," which don't really mean anything and don't make sense, and then 12 regenerates into 13, and that is the end of the episode. Personally, and maybe this is just me, but I would have vastly preferred if 12's last words had been what he said a couple minutes previously, "Well, I suppose one more lifetime won't kill anyone. Well, except me." Overall, I just think that...
Well, I suppose one more lifetime won't kill anyone. Well, except me.
fits the context and character of the story much better than the nearly 2.5 minutes of talking between except me and the actual regeneration. I counted. It is actually... it's like 2 minutes, 20 seconds. And I think that the one more lifetime won't kill anyone just holds a much greater emotional impact than Doctor, I let you go, which can join timing malfunction. The Master, he's out there, I know, I've got to stop him, as some of the most forgettable last words ever spoken by a Doctor. Same goes for Here We Go, the Long Ray round from the first Doctor. It just didn't feel that unique to the first Doctor or fit his character very well. Maybe that's just me, though. Anyway, overall, I found Twice Upon a Time more disappointing than anything. It started off really strongly, but quickly just found nowhere to go. I don't hate it, though. Overall, I'm just disappointed in it. Other than the first Doctor's sexism, it didn't make me angry like other episodes like Hellbent, Live the Land, and Destiny of the Daleks did. I just found Twice Upon a Time didn't try hard enough or have the wasted good ideas to really make me hate it. So overall, I give it a 4 out of 10 on enjoyability and a 2 out of 10 compared to the other Doctor Who episodes.